What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome to another Not Your Status Quo video, where we are going to take a look at Loki, and we're going to talk about what's next. And just a reminder, we're live from the Sprite Dome.
Now than ever it's bright.
Cool and refreshing.
Nothing better.
So Dave, how was your trip to the Lyman Mines? Did you gather some delicious, quench-tasting research?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Great.
I'm gonna make a separate video for it this week.
Beautiful. Wonderful.
Watch
Well,
for that.
Let's go ahead and dive into what we saw with Loki.
Thanks, Doug. You know, as I'm watching this episode, and there's a few things that keep building up that kind of making me jump back and forth on who I think is going to be actually the person running the TV. Obviously, we know now the timekeepers, at least in that sort of instance, aren't real.
Yeah?
Fake. Mindless androids.
So there's a few things I keep thinking. One, I keep thinking Kang, because obviously Renslayer and him had a relationship in the comics. Her number is like A24, which Avengers 24 was the first appearance of Kang in the comics. So that's more of an Easter egg, but it still keeps bringing Kang up. But then I think, this isn't Kang's style. He's a conqueror. Who is more of a trickster? Who is more using a little more guile, using a little more illusion, using more lies? Loki. And obviously we saw a bunch of the Lokis at the end of this episode, which was framed very much like the end of Avengers, when he's lying down and they're all looking at him. And that was on purpose. The director, Kate Herron, I think, said it was very on purpose the way they did that. So I'm thinking it's going to be King Loki. We didn't see King Loki with the Council of Lokis or whatever that was in the mid-credit scene. So I think he is the one pulling the strings. And I keep feeling the reason they had to come in front of the timekeepers to be disposed is because King Loki knows that's how it has to go to keep him in power.
Do you think in the MCU that it was a Loki who created the TVA then?
No, not in the comics. But I think they're going
I know
to
not in the
different-
comics, that's why I'm saying in the MCU. You know that we've already seen this happen where they kind of veer in a different direction than what we're expecting because of the comics. And the MCU kind of does things a little bit different. They'll switch it up. So I'm wondering, are they going to, like even with Sylvie, for instance, she's an amalgamation of two characters that doesn't really exist in the comics. Do you think they're going to take this in another direction and be like a mouth dropping, like, I'm sorry, who made the TVA? Like, do you think the timekeepers are completely made up?
I do. And I think it's all going to be King Loki at the end of time.
Okay.
He was the one who kind of knew this had to go a certain way. He knew there was other timelines where he was out of power, and he wants to bring it all to himself. And of course, he's going to use lies, telling the variants they were created by the timekeepers. And obviously, enough people know about Loki that he can't say, hey, it's me, Loki, running this. So he created the timekeepers. He created all of this to keep everybody in check. And he's done a great job of it. And I think he knows that Sylvie and, we'll call him MCU Loki, have to do these certain things in a certain way. And it's going to fall apart at some point. It's either going to be in the next episode or episode 6. And then I think the way Kang gets involved, once the TVA is exposed and destroyed and we start getting into the multiverse of madness, Kang is going to see this as a TVA employee. I have all of this, equipment I can use, and he's going to start conquering everything, and he's going to do it for one reason. Renslayer is going to basically be in a coma at the end of this. Something is going to happen, and a lot like the comics, where she's in a coma and he's always searching for a way to revive her. Same thing is going to happen here. He is going to be angry, thankfully not at Iron Man or Tony Stark, but because, the love of his life, Renslayer, is in a coma, and that's what's going to drive him to become the conqueror that we know in the comics.
That would be very awesome. It would give him more of a reason to be a bad guy rather than just being evil for the sake of being evil, and it would fit in with the way that the MCU has been going with a lot of its villains. But I'm curious what you guys think. So that was kind of a big revelation about this idea that the TVA may be some sort of fabrication, and the timekeepers may not even be real. Leave it down in the comments below what you think about that.
And, for me, I love your theories. I do. And I just think you're way too smart for these writers, for these shows.
Yeah.
Because, he should be a producer on these shows, giving them ideas, because whenever he has a good idea, they just seem to go the opposite way. And this show, for me, is kind of getting dry. Because there's, I love the King Loki theory, but they have done nothing to show that it would be a King Loki. And in the other shows, when they did the same thing, where we had these big suspicions and they didn't, let anything on, there was nothing to let on about. So I think that's where this one's going too.
Well, and I think they have done a little bit to talk about variant Lokis. They've talked about how there's been more variants than almost anybody else, except for obviously Steve Rogers. And, we see the Council of Lokis at the end of this episode.
You wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me. Yeah, murmur it up, D-bags.
And they, talked, always putting down the Loki variants, which makes me think that's implanted from the head of the TVA, because he's Loki Prime. All the others are variants of him, and so he's calling them weaker. So I think they've done a little bit to go that route. And I think with the MCU, I've been guiltier probably than anyone else with every little thing. The gum choice they have leads me to believe, it's Mephisto. And I was wrong, but it's still fun. But I think it fits with how they go. WandaVision, the big bad, was basically Agatha Harkness, who we had met at the beginning, and we all kind of knew who she was until, we knew Agnes was just a ploy to get closer to Wanda. We got that right. And I think this, a lot like everything being introduced now, the big bad isn't going to be some big surprise at the end. It is going to be a variant Loki, because they've talked about it the entire show about variants. And I think that's how they're going to wrap this up, with TVA coming down, multiverse exploding, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, all that stuff.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
I was a bit thrown off by this episode. While I did enjoy it, it was the first of these Disney Plus series where we had a mid-credit scene or an end-credit scene that wasn't a final episode. And if I hadn't been told prior to it, even being there, I don't know that I would have continued watching through the credits and seen it. So this is something that I thought was kind of out of left field, and I'm surprised that Marvel did it. It was not something that I expected. It's something that I expect in the movies, and when I go to the theater, I notice it through the credits because I know to expect it. And so this threw me off a little bit when I found out that there was a mid-credit scene in episode, what is this?
4.
Episode 4, yeah. Not even the last episode.
Well, as I was watching this, and as Loki got pruned, and,
you figured there had to be...
Yeah, Sylvie had Renslayer, you're going to tell me everything. I'm sitting there thinking, as I'm enjoying the delicious Sprite I had, waiting for me while I was watching this episode.
Hey, mister, can I trade in this 7-Up for a Sprite?
I'm like, is there anything more refreshing and delicious as the Sprite? And then I'm thinking, are they going to make us wait a week to know that Loki's alive? I'm like, I don't think they would do that. They got to show something, right? And I'm kind of doubting myself, and then that came up, and we saw, which was, I thought, amazing. We saw, classic Loki. We saw Kid Loki.
Oh, yeah.
We saw Boastful Loki, as the credits called him. And then we saw Gator Loki. What do you think Gator Loki did?
Well, it sounds like, from what I'm understanding, based on their pruning of Sylvie, basically, or rather grabbing her in the first place, it's for the crime of existing. That's what it sounds like, because any of these Lokis that are outside of the mainstream perfect timeline Loki seems to be a variant. And, so I think what they're doing is they're grabbing all of these Lokis that don't look like the MCU Loki, and I think they're getting rid of them all.
And because remember, Sylvie did ask Renslayer when they were going to the Timekeepers, in this episode, what exactly was my next event? She's like, I don't remember. Because I think you're right, I don't think there was one. I think King Loki, if I'm right, said, she's going to be a problem for me down the line, possibly. We've got to grab her. And so they did. It could be, Gator Loki, which, as soon as I saw Gator Loki, which I didn't notice him right away, when I watched it again, I noticed, because I just saw Kid Loki and, Richard E. Grant as classic Loki, which was amazing. And when I watched it again, I'm like, oh my God, there's a gator. Kid Loki's holding a gator. Which makes me think that hopefully we get a special appearance from Throg, which is Thor Frog.
Yes.
Because I assume that Gator Loki and Frog Thor live in the same universe.
They have to.
So you heard it here first. Throg is making appearance in Loki.
100% confirmed. Not your status quo. We're never wrong.
One thing I didn't like is like that Loki got pruned, okay? And you had that extra credit scene. And, Mobius also got pruned. It made me feel like, I've been watching this all along, making me feel like, that's the death, right?
The main characters.
And then they do that, and they ain't gonna kill Loki. All right, so that whole pruning thing meant nothing to anybody. But I think you saw where Loki ended up, Loki Land, with all the other Lokis. What if Mobius is on a jet ski? He just got sent to a jet ski.
But see, I looked at it as now finding out that pruning isn't disintegrating these people.
It's like teleporting.
No disintegration.
As you wish.
It's another lie from the TVA, making themselves seem more powerful than they actually are. We may see that Goldman Sachs, accountant kid that got pruned in the first episode. We may see him there. We may see everyone who's ever been pruned there. Where it is, I don't know yet. Obviously, it's some dead alternative timeline that they're keeping there to keep all these people, which is probably going to prove to be their downfall. Because, hey, everyone there has one thing in common. We were pruned by the TVA, and we want revenge. So I can see them working together to stop the TVA, and then all go their separate ways and backstab each other.
What if they're all in there and, time doesn't exist in a negative dimension? What if they're with Dormammu?
Oh. It didn't look like the negative dimension, but you could be onto something. It could be something similar to that.
Well, they're just on the planet's surface, right? Do we get to see the sky? I don't remember what the sky looked like.
The sky looked normal. It doesn't mean it couldn't be in the negative, in the Dormammu's realm somewhere where he's allowing the TVA to do this for whatever reason.
It's beyond time.
Maybe to give him, maybe it's like a no conflict agreement that they have. Well, that kind of brings me to my overall theory about this episode, and that has to do with this location and also with the tools that the TVA is using in order to send people to this location. Now, obviously, they have got all of their agents convinced that this is disintegrating people, this is pruning them from the timeline, and I assume the TVA agents must think that it's killing them, right? Which, odd that they have to, actually live with that knowledge, but what is powering these items? Is this technology or, and prepare to reel me in, is this Infinity Stones?
But the Infinity Stones don't work.
They don't work in the TVA.
Okay, you got me. They don't work in the TVA.
No need to reel.
No need to reel. But yeah, I was just wondering about what was actually allowing these things to work. What was at work here? Was this magic or technology that was allowing these items to work and move them from one location to another, wherever this place may be?
I think it's all going to depend on who we find as revealed is behind all of this. If it's Kang, it'll probably be technology. If it is King Loki, it'll probably be magic of some sort.
Very astute.
That was all of our theories, and that was everything that we found in this episode of Loki. We'd love to hear more about what you guys think, so make sure you comment down below, and we'll see you next time on Not Your Status Quo.